On the Edge Survival here, this is going to be medical tip number 5. One thing that I think a lot of people probably have not thought about regarding their medical kits is having a good set of instruments in that kit to work with. So this is just a brief overview of a few things that you may find handy to put in your medical kit. One thing that I think is very important to have is featured on our far left. This is a razor. Now this particular razor is it's sterile, in sterile packaging, number 11. There's many uses for a razor. One of the most common things that you can use a razor for is opening up abscesses. Now keep in mind, I'm showing this to you to have in your medical kit in case of bad times. Maybe you're in a third world country. I'm not advising that you do these kind of procedures at home, especially when we're blessed in this country to have access to medical care. These are only recommendations for things take a turn for the worse. So a razor. Now you can use any type of razor as long as you sterilize it, and there are several ways to sterilize equipment, and we won't be covering many of those ways in this video, but I will show you one way here in just a second that you can sterilize small equipment. The next thing that would be a good idea to have is a cauterizer. Now this is this is a professional cauterizer, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the camera, but there's batteries in here. You press this button and that tip will glow red hot. And one really good use for this is, let's say that you smash your thumb in a car door, or you hit it with a hammer, and you get a tremendous amount of blood underneath this nail, and it causes a lot of pressure and a lot of pain. Well, one way to relieve that pain is to actually burn a small hole into the nail bed with this cauterizer. It's very quick and much less painful than cutting it with a razor, and that will allow that trapped blood to escape and relieve that pressure. That is one way to manage that. Now, a lot of you may not have access to a cauterizer. They're not necessarily easy to find. It's not something people really have laying around. So there's another way to do this. You can take a safety clip, safety pin, that provides you with a sharp edge, and we want to sterilize this, and the best way to do that, since this is so small, is to use a lighter. Now let me give you a tip about doing this. There is the red part of the flame, and below it is the blue part of the flame. If you will put the tip of this safety pin in the blue part of the flame, you will not have a carbon buildup on the tip. Whereas if you put the tip into the orange part of the flame, it will become black, and that's a carbon buildup that you see on the end of that tip. So put your tip in the lower portion, the blue portion of the flame, to avoid that. And you want to leave that onto there for the longer you can, the better. Eventually this entire pin will get hot as the metal conducts that heat, but you want to sterilize that. Now when you sterilize something, once we sterilize it, we don't want to touch it. We don't want to lay it down somewhere. It's not sterile after that. So if you're going to do something and you need this sterile, maybe you're going to remove a splinter or whatnot, or even as we talked about, punching a hole in a finger, burning a hole in a fingernail. Once you sterilize it, don't lay it down, don't touch it. You need to be ready to do the procedure once you sterilize it, because you will lose the sterility once you lay it down. The next two things I have, these are ear curettes. These are interesting, and this one is a scoop, And this other one I have is just simply a loop. You can actually see through it. And these are good for removing earwax from an ear. Now it would help if you had an otoscope where you could actually look into the ear. But one big thing that happens, especially in third world countries, is people, and they don't clean their ears. They don't have a way to clean their ears well, and so that wax builds up, and to the point a lot of people, they simply lose hearing out of an ear just simply from earwax buildup. Or a lot of times you'll get bugs in their ears. The bug will scratch around and eventually die, and that wax will build up around that and completely block an ear canal. And I removed several bugs and several enormous chunks of wax from ears from some kids in El Salvador. And just with this simple plastic tool, a lot of people are able to hear much better. So that is an important thing, as simple as that may be, to have in your medical kit. Now be very careful with these. You've got an eardrum that you don't want to rupture. You don't want to ram these things down your ear. You want to be very careful, very gentle when doing something like that. And I wouldn't advise doing it unless you've done it before. But in the situations that we're preparing for, that is something to keep in mind to have in your medical kit. Now next, these are Hemastats, and there's different sizes. I have two different sizes here, and these basically they click, they lock in place. And for example, let's say if we get a fish hook, caught in our hand, a good way to remove that is actually to push that fish hook through the skin, cut off the barb, and then you can remove the fish hook. But you need a way to hold on to that fish hook. So this is the way to do it. Clicks, and you can maneuver whatever you need to maneuver. There are a lot of other uses for that, but that's just one idea. Another good thing to have is a good pair of trauma shears. And these are actually picked up at a hardware store, but working on the ambulance, a lot of times we get these for free from flight services that do presentations or whatnot. But these are very good to have. A lot of them are very strong. A lot of people will cut pennies and things with them to show their strength. So that's a good thing to have for removing clothing or whatever, cutting bandages to fit. Lots of ideas. There are many different sizes. There's some smaller, scissors you could buy, but that's a good thing to keep in mind. And the rest of the things that we have down here, these are forceps. A lot of people call them tweezers, and I know you can't focus. There's different types. This particular set has some points on the end that you can actually grab tissue, grab skin with, and maybe you need to pull a skin flap out of the way in order to get into a wound to clean. You can do that, with these. They will grab on very well. We have other, different. These do not have the teeth on them. These are a little bit thinner. There's lots of different shapes. These actually have an arch to them, and there are technical names for all of these, but for our purposes we can be a little more simplistic. This pair is a little more interesting in that they hold shut until you squeeze, so they'll actually hold on. It might make it easier for you to maneuver things, kind of similar to our Hemastats. So this is, by no means a complete overview of all the instruments that are available. This is just something to kind of open your eyes up to the thought of using instruments in your medical kits. So that is it for medical tip number 5.